So hope you all had nice lunch. All awake? Okay. So we're just going to start the session. We'll just wait for 2 minutes and we'll go ahead. People who are seated at the back, request you to come ahead. So it will be more clear and visible. Because there are a lot of empty spaces in between. I request you to come ahead now. Okay, let's start the session for today. So, welcome everyone to STC India Chapter 2019. It's glad to see each and every one of you present here, taking your own time on a weekday. I understand there's a lot of office work and all, but then to you have come out here and just for learning and share your knowledge across. So today I'm going to present a session on the ABCs of QA, redefining the fundamentals of quality assurance. So our speaker for today is Kim Stanley. Kim Stanley is an experienced instructional designer with a successful history in the software industry. Over 15 years leading training teams and providing project management has culminated in her current position, managing a global UX Center of Excellence team at Epico Software Corporation in the United States. So I please welcome her on the dais. A big round of applause to Kim Stanley. Accompanying her is Siva Venkata. Venkata Siva is a recent graduate with master's degree in computer science from Christ University, Bangalore. He pursued research in the area of web readability and accessibility. After completing a quality assurance software engineer internship with Epicor Software, he transitioned to his current role as a digital content developer. He's a first-time speaker who is very passionate about the inclusion of UX and customer-centric design. So I welcome Venkata on to the dais. Big round of applause. Thank you. So everyone have got this? Yeah. Please raise your hand if.
Let's say they're duplicating it. They duplicated it. I think. Yeah, I'll go for it. It's track 2. What's that? Okay, once all of you settle down, we'll start. If you're planning to sit in the back, I request you to come to the front row. It's empty. Well, so before everyone settles down, a quick question for you. How many of you know ABC? Yeah. Hands up, please. ABC. Okay, go on. I mean, if you know it. Oh, that's great. You know 26 alphabets. That's great. Oh, okay. Haven't seen that. Ooh, there's a D along with ABC. Okay, so it won't be that pro kind of thing where we'll just take you into it and say, oh, this is what we're going to do, all that. So it's rather an experience that we experienced in our organization when we were going through the process of digital transformation. And as most of you are actually experienced professionals, my bad. So you must have seen your organizations going through a lot of transformation with the inclusion of AI, ML. So we see all the fields going out of the regular human touch which I believe in, it should always be humans that stay on this. We're going away to, automation or robotics, but we still have the option to actually get back to what we believe in, right? We're all human at the end. So we'll be touching on the concepts of the ABC that we implemented in transforming our process to a digital process. Yeah. So before getting ahead into the topic, so who are we? So we're Epicor Software Corporation based out of USA, and we're located in Bangalore, and we've been in the industry of providing industry specific software for the last 30 years, and we have a bunch of products. Considering I'm a newbie in the organization, I don't even know all the products that we actually have, so I'm still in the process of learning all those. And yeah, so as I told you, every organization has a need to go through the modern transformation, and for us, being a 30-year-old organization, we have all the products that are like age old, which have good amount of user base, and our organization realized that it's time for us to also move forward, and in order to move forward, we actually had to transform. So as a part of that, we developed a corporate initiative which says that we should provide assistance to all our users with 3 major parts. One is onboarding. Let's say as we serve ERP business, and retail is one of them. Let's say, can I have your name, ma'am? Tejasri. Let's say Tejasri holds a store in Arizona. So she's into retail business, and she has 4 employees who's working for her, for the last 20 years, and suddenly she needs to hire someone instead of them. So how does she take her through the platform? And her whole store runs on the software, because everything that comes to her store goes out in the form of sale, or the money that she pays to the vendors, suppliers, everything needs to be there. And you actually need to train your new user, only one. Let's say that she holds a big firm, bigger than all these corporate sectors that you see. They have like thousands of stores. Now you have 2,000 people onboarding at the same time. And in order to do that, you need to have a good amount of human effort where you go and teach them. 2,000 people, and still you can't reach out to everyone. Just like all of you are sitting here, I'm not sure how many people are actually receiving me. Even though all of you are present here, the same happens. And in a business setting, it's a big scenario because you have a lot of money invested into it. So that's how they realize that onboarding should be as simple as possible. Yeah. And so the guided learning that we will be working on would be in-app. Yeah. Okay, so the GIF isn't playing, but so other than onboarding, we always envisioned it to be in product. So let's say that your user is in one place and you ask them if he needs help, take him to 20 different places. That doesn't sound feasible for the user because it costs him again time. So it should be on product, and we always want it to be based on the context where user is present. Let's say that you're searching for a video in YouTube and I take you out from YouTube and I give you a suggestion in Facebook. Would you like to see it? No, you're in YouTube in the first place to see something there. So that's what we wanted our product to be. So the instructions were simple as a part of the corporate initiative. We should make onboarding as easy as it can, and at the same time you don't even actually need a lot of intervention from others. And it should be in product, and there should always be context on where we're working. Yeah.
So all of that obviously is a huge challenge I think you need to click again. This animation's not working. I have nothing, it's not on there. Sorry, we have technical difficulties. All right, well, I'll talk while I'll let you look at that. Can everybody hear me? So this was obviously a big challenge, right? We have 13 members of our group, many of which are here. Raise your hand. This is part of our team. So we had to have these 13 individuals who are across the globe working in, I think we have up to 6 different time zones that we have to deal with. Plus we have to interact with a department of 1,000 people. So you can imagine what happens, right? Every day you have to talk to people in your department. You might have an email, instant message, text message, phone call, meeting. Very easy for things to be misunderstood, right? It's very sometimes difficult to put that tone into your email. Things are misrepresented. So we, of course, had this same issue. When we were trying to develop a quality assurance program, we wanted to make sure that there weren't these gaps, right? There weren't miscommunications between the flow chart that you have, right? We want to make sure that it's moving on to the next space. And without having a process in place, we could never meet the goals that Siva spoke about for the company. So we decided to incorporate some design thinking principles to come up with how we were going to manage this task. And so in looking at that, we looked at what's the first step in doing that, and that would be to empathize with your learner, right, or your audience, whoever that is and whoever you're writing for, or in our case, making step-by-step guided learning that moves them through a process, as well as documentation and video. So Siva has an exercise that he's going to have you work on to see if you can relate to the concept of empathizing with your learner.
Yeah. So for the activity, I request all of you to stand up wherever you are. Yeah, so the activity is simple. I am going to give you instructions which are clear. So based on your understanding, you could follow the instruction. So the first instruction is, if you had idli for breakfast today, so you turn to your left by 90 if you had idli. If you didn't, you're going to turn the other side by 90 degrees. Okay, oh, good amount of you actually. Well, the second instruction is, if you have more than 2 siblings, you're going to turn towards your left by 90 degrees. If not, turn right by 90 degrees. More than 2 siblings. Okay, cool. Oh. Yeah.
I mean, siblings, 5 siblings, you need just
Real. Okay, the next instruction is, I hope all of you know pressure cooker. If you have more than 2 pressure cookers at home, you turn towards your left by 90. If not, turn towards your right by 90. Okay, so now I request all of you to stay wherever you are and take a look at the whole hall we're in and see where each one is facing. Okay, so you could turn back now. So the task.
You have a seat.
Oh yeah, sorry, please have a seat. So the task is simple. All of you belong to one or the other industry who's working in the technical communication part, and all of you all of you are well educated and you took up the career to be here, and all of us are actually in the same hall, sitting in the same hotel, but there's something that actually differs from all of us. Yeah, so may I ask you, what is it that we differ? Sir, please. Okay, can you put it in other form, which is easy to understand?
How materialistic and what we are.
Okay, that's a good.
There are 2 differences. I could have been just married, so I just want to have 2 people when I need one.
Okay, that's an interesting observation. Well, anyone wants to say, what do you think the major part that differentiated all of us? Okay, that's a major part, because none of you asked me that question. I said that the instruction will be clear, so I said left. So that would have been the first question, and trust me, the user is the same. So when you give an instruction in a manual that says, hey, so you will see a button somewhere here on the screen, you go and click it. What if the person is facing here and using the mouse like this? I mean, there are possibilities. It's not that he'll always be facing front. But again, the important questions that we need to ask, the main thing is the context. All of us are not from the same family, even though we belong to the same organization or country. So, and your understanding of pressure cooker might differ from my understanding of rice cooker, because both are 2 different things. And at the same time, do you understand what is left and what is right? Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. So that's what context. So context differs from person to person. Let's say what I think is A might differ from her because she is in a completely different country. And I'm based out of Bangalore. For me, someone says traffic, I would say 2 hours of traffic, oh my God. And for her, 2 hours of drive would be nothing. Even though the 2 hours is the same, for her it would be a 100-mile drive. For me, it's 5-kilometer drive, which is a big thing. So that's what we understood, that we actually had to ask the questions. That what our user thinks, or all of you are writing, I'm sure the content is consumed by thousands of professionals all across the world. So that's when we need to understand that the context is present. Yeah. So as I said, as you pointed out, left can differ, right can differ from person to person, and we don't know if he knows 40 or 90 degrees what it is. If I say 90 degrees and he's going to turn this, we can't question him, right? Because it's his understanding. So what I wanted to teach you people was the word empathize, because I was trying to understand who you are as audience. So that's why every time I asked a question, I was looking at least a few of you to see, oh my God, okay. So if you actually did it or not. So the important process of our framework was empathizing, because our audience differed from country to country. So even though they are from the same country, they are from different states.
So with keeping this in mind, then we had to figure out what our QA process was going to look like. So one of the things we did was just point out what makes a successful program, right? What are our positives? What are the pluses that we can take into this? And so our goal, right, is to create content that every user can understand. Not necessarily possible, but we have to try. That's our ultimate goal. We also, in our industry, have to be conscious of software changes. So anyone in here write for software? No. So, that stays the same all the time, right? There's never any changes. So, so we had to keep that in mind with our program, being able to be flexible. And our target was to have this ultimate customer experience. So we wanted to make sure that quality was being met. We also wanted to have consistent process, right? So that one member of the team was not off doing their own thing and maybe their style was coming through, which isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it can't be different, right? I'm not going to read 2 articles and have it be obvious that 2 people have written those. And then part of a role in that too is, after it being defined, is following through and make sure it's being adhered to. So everyone in here on my team knows that when things get sent to an intern or manager for approval, we make sure that the same things that we have listed that need to happen are happening. And we want to be able to onboard new people as well, which I hope never happens. We don't want we don't want anybody to leave, but it happens, right? You move up in your career. We wanted to be able to fill that space, have everything documented and defined, so that if somebody else had to come in, it was easy for them to catch up. And then along with that, we wanted to say, okay, well, what are our risks? What do we have working against us? What do we need to be aware of? And obviously, time, money, and resources. So I know we all sat through the servant leadership, and we don't want employees who feel overworked. We don't want to have unrealistic goals. We want to make sure that this process is smooth and we have everything in place to enable them to do their job in the quickest amount of time. Every time when you're doing quality assurance, every iteration, right, that work comes back through someone is eating up time. That time costs money. So we wanted to slow that down, ultimately getting one day to maybe a single pass of work, right? It's so fantastic that it doesn't need any edits. And then we don't want to give up quality for speed. So it's a very difficult balance.
And when all the things would pass in the first edit itself, I think our team would be happiest because we actually have to wait for hours because of the time differences till we get onto the work.
This is beta time. Okay. So the way that we implemented this plan was a couple of years ago, we had a very small product, right? It has limited functionality, and we put guided learning in there sort of with not a lot of thought, and just sort of let it ride out to see what it did. And we have some metrics on that that we'll show at the end. And then the big project that we've all worked on is we expanded that platform into a full retail program. And then we worked very diligently to put in a lot of content, video, documentation, and the walkthrough, right? It guides you step by step. And then we wanted to see, well, what happens? Is this able to work? So we have had 2 beta customers who went through with limited training. Previously, you had to have on-site training, phone training, very expensive. So we wanted to eliminate that. They were able to go live without that. And we have general released it since then. And we have, I think we're up to 5 or 6 customers now who are able to pretty much train themselves on the software. And then obviously we have lots of metrics that we're still monitoring. We have to track, how much time it takes to do each of these so that we can see how, if this is really working.
And so this brings us back to the framework ABC that we implemented. So that's why we said redefining, because we are giving another name to the alphabets. So the framework that we work on, the A that stands for is always ask. So there were a few roadblocks that we came across.
Yeah, I don't think this is the new version.
Bear with me for a minute. Excuse me.
Does this the pad work?
Yeah,
Got
we
it.
got it. Thank you. Yeah,
You just
so
needed to come up first.
I hope you stay here so it works fine. Yeah, so there were a few roadblocks, for the implementation of this process, because it was only theoretical before we implemented it. And so the most important roadblocks that we came across were communication paths. Considering that she lives in another part of the world and we live in another part of the world, so because we're not directly communicating, we have a lot of tools to actually communicate right now. It can be the mail that you use, or you have all the social media apps. But still, the problem is as we go back to the context, what I meant by masala dosa might not be the masala dosa for her, because she didn't have it from the same place as I did. So that was one thing that we experienced it. So we actually had to establish clear communication path, which would help us to understand what you meant. Is at least I try to understand 90% of what you meant to write. And the second one was to define stakeholders. And this is an important topic, because all of us write for something or create for something. Often we're not the people who develop the product that we work on. And let's say that a button says click save. Yeah, that's the save icon. And you click the save icon, and rather than it going to save, it takes you to some other page. And what are you going to do? Or when you're in the shoes of a user? You're scared, right? Let's say that you're maybe depositing money into an account from your bank application, and then you send deposit. Instead of that, there's one more option, maybe like donate to charity right next to it. And you click on donate to charity, and you're expecting the confirmation on your phone, and it says, hey, thank you for donating a generous sum to our charity. We will give you a free place or a bed to stay in our charity when you rolled. Do you want it to be happening? No. So that's why we have, sorry, go on. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We are not working on the functionality part of it, right? I mean, we are not software developers. We are indeed writing. Yeah, so I was going back to the same point. So the person who developed it, keeping in mind, again, the context is the factor. Let's say that it says it should show a success message for the user, and the success message differs. What do you say if you want to say success to someone? I'm like, hey, you did this successfully. How do you put it in your own words? So how you interpret it is completely different from how I interpret it. So over here, the products that we work on are rather developed by people who are technically skilled. Let's say the person knows Python, right? He might not understand of what your understanding is. So every time you actually define stakeholders, people who are working on the products, like product owners, business analysts who require or who gather requirements for it. So we need to go back to them asking the same questions. Hey, do you think this is what it meant to do? And trust me, if you go back to them and say that, hey, the product that you worked on isn't working fine, there is possibility that they will not react to you positively, because no one wants, them to be said that your baby isn't good. That's how it goes. And so that's when we have to come up with the quality of diplomacy, where how we portray to them is to be in the most diplomatic way. As it says, right, the win-win situation. You should be saying it to him that it doesn't work fine. At the same time, you need to get the work done for you. And I believe it happens most of the time that we assume things as human rather than getting it inquired from them. So maybe it would be an easy task if we just go and ask them than sitting in our desk and say, oh my God, the person might have thought of this or this. So that's how we end up in cases that would never encounter in real life case. And when we're doing all of these, we had to come up with feedback methods that actually give us the most accurate results. And so the second B of it is behave bizarrely. So right after you develop the product, you need someone to test it out.
You want to get the click up? Will the other bullet points come up? There we go. So you have to think like a customer, right? Which is not always easy. I thoroughly enjoy breaking things when they get sent to me and the instructions say click here, and then I don't. I click something else and see what happens. So I can get stuck. And our interns do the same thing to make sure that what we've created is going to get the user to the end result no matter what thing they do. You can write it out and give it to them, but they're not going to listen, right? Anyone here who doesn't follow instructions? Yeah. And then again, targeting your audience. The product that we happen to be working on is a very niche industry, the retail industry for hardware stores. So they all have their own lingo and the way they do things. So the team had to really understand what that meant. What words were going to resonate with them, why they were in business, how they did things. That was a big part of it, so that they're able to behave bizarrely. They know how the customer is going to break it, and then coming up with test cases, right? When you're writing, if you have an example of something in your documentation and it doesn't match anything your audience would ever do, right? These are retail hardware guys. If I start talking about women's shoes in my example, they are not going to like that, and it's going to be very strange for them and disrupt, their learning from the content. And then it's back to trying to break it, right? Just customers will come up with just the most crazy ways to not do things correctly. I know I've been on a chat, like you're trying to use a website and some error message comes up, and then the agent says, well, I've never seen that before. So we want to try and cut that off and be proactive.
Sorry. Yeah. So in order to understand what were the things that were going fine and the things that were acting against us, we had to create checklists that would make sure that the product would be the same. So let's say 10 people are working on 10 different documents and everyone's writing style differs from each other. And we don't want our users to notice it because everyone has their own way of writing, and there is possibility that they might like one and they might not like the other one. And that would cause a lot of problems. And so as a manager, that's when she comes in, where she understands users because she knows them, at the same time the people working on for them. So she ended up creating a checklist. Would you like to speak about that?
Oh, yes, and I'm very forgetful, so I like to write things down. So it's nice to have a checklist, right, before you are ready to publish something, because I believe the gentleman in the last series talked about getting interrupted 12 times a day. I think we all get interrupted about 12 times every hour, so it's nice to have a checklist to go back to. Joseph, last one? Okay. And then ultimately to eradicate errors, right? Reducing time, money, and keeping resources happy. We want to have fewer mistakes if you have a checklist.
And So being an intern with this team for a span of 6 months, well, so I'm not an experienced professional right now because I came right out of college in the month of May 2019, and when I started interning for them on the floor, so the mindset of my student mindset that everyone has when you're a student, I thought, being in a big industry and you hear all this buzz about corporates are these where, they don't give you a lot, good amount of tasks, or they don't give you big responsibilities when you're initially into the organization. For that, you rather needs to be, experienced, where you understand the things. And the one thing that surprised me in the team was they've given more value to my feedback than the person who's actually developing it. Because I didn't know that I was a user who doesn't know the product. And the people who are working on it know it completely. So I ended up representing the end user who is using the software for the first time rather than someone who used it for a good amount of time. And the best part was the feedback that I gave. I would quote an example that I gave to my friend. So it said that, you need to do it in this order. Let's say that you're going to go to X and then you go to Y and click save and then you're going to go Z and then close it. Well, I had to break it. That was my responsibility. So I did the things on the other way. Because when I was a kid, my mom was always saying that every time she asked me to do something, I always ended up doing the exact opposite. And if you have kids at home, I'm sure they'll do the same. You ask them to do something, they end up doing exact opposite. And that was the fun part of it, where I actually understood that those are the users. And they might differ. Let's say, as I told about retail industry, your customer can be the store owner who is 50 years old, or it can be a graduate who's looking for a part-time job and he just wants to do some fun things and then with the money he earns. So we differ from users to users, and probably if your kid ends up being a student in a high school, I'm sure he would do the same thing which teacher told him not to do. So,
And I have to remind Siva often that 50 is not an example of someone who's old.
my bad.
Being 50. So we're going to get into the metrics.
And so when we implemented this process, we had only a few factors that could measure the process that we implemented. And one of them was the number of support calls that we received. And if you take a look at the graph, in 2017, we had a client base of 3,218, and we had 141 customer support calls received by our executives. And when we moved to the year 2018, the number of users was scaled up. We reached 3,692, and even our support calls grew to a huge amount. They went to 201. And that's when we have implemented our process. And the next year it was surprising, the users grew by a number of 20, and we had 3,709 people working on a product. Surprisingly, there were only 106 calls that were received, even though the number of users went up. So that actually gave us an intro that we were able to help our users being wherever they were by helping the task for them, so that they don't actually have to sit in California and call someone in Bangalore and ask for a doubt which is on their screen. And as I said, the number of calls per year went down significantly. And what does it mean? So it actually helped us to understand our corporate initiatives that were actually working in place. One of them was onboarding, because there were new users who were coming. They were getting onboarding done in time. At the same time, which is contextual for them, they were all able to relate. And I mean, I believe that in the whole world, Indians know the value of money more than anything else. Because from your childhood, your mom would say to you, you say, "Mama, get me that bike." And she would say, no, not now. You get first rank in 10th class, I'll give you that bike. So we always relate things to expense of the things, and which is actually a lot of money for an organization. At the same time, it involves a lot of burden. And
So I'm disappointed that our guided learning won't work here, but so you could see an example of it. But if you're speaking with WhatFix out in the lobby, you can see what our step-by-step process looks like. So just by following this very basic concept, A, B, and C, our QA is able to follow the flow that you have in the handout. It works pretty smoothly. Our content has been incredibly well received. We have surveys that pop up in parts of the software, and we get nothing but great feedback from our customers saying how helpful it is. And additionally, with the metrics that we showed, sometimes there's some concern, well, is this going to eliminate support jobs, right? Is that what this is about? But actually, our support staff and our trainers now use this content that we've developed that's very conversational and pretty much accounts for you not doing things correctly. They're using that to train the customers, so we don't really have any downsizing involved with it. We have better, happier customers, better NPS scores, and satisfaction.
And we're open for questions. Oh yeah, so you ask a question, you get a goodie bag, I would say.
Coming to your you talked about ABC. So coming to your where you're talking always ask, there are a couple of things that I wanted to understand. First, when you said diplomacy, to what extent we are actually employing that, and in this world when we are encouraging and pushing people to be radically candid, because that's how teams should work and they must work, where does this fit in?
I would ask her to explain that.
So it's a fine line, right? But you can still, you want to keep that communication channel open, right? If you come to them, a developer constantly, especially with things that are unfounded, right? You haven't thoroughly tested it, you're not able to recreate it, you're going to annoy that person, and that person is going to try to cut off that channel of communication. So, plus it's kind of a mutual respect in our case, because not only are we doing QA for our work, but we are doing QA in essence for the product. There are many bugs and changes that get made just from the things that we've reviewed, so they respect that. But putting things in a certain way in your email or your phone call or your instant message is very critical, right? It's trying to develop that sense that we're working together instead of against each other.
So Kim, so do you have usability testing as part of your process?
Yes, I mean, we're getting that. We can publish things immediately. So once it's gone through the QA process, it goes out there. And then the tool that we use to host all of that documentation video and the walkthroughs has analytics. So we can see where is this breaking, where are customers leaving a process, are they hitting a certain goal or a certain milestone.
Thank you. I have more questions, but in case, I do want to keep this floor open for others to ask.
Okay, as time is a factor, we'll take one last question.
We can take one last
and then you
question.
can have the later shot. I'm happy implemented this QA workflow.
Funny you should ask. You want to talk about JIRA? I don't know. So we actually got ahead of ourselves a little bit in doing this, and we're not into JIRA yet. We had we still have an in-house product to monitor all of this that's very old school and no one likes. So we're in the process of shifting to JIRA to do it.
What do you all use currently?
It's someone that works for us made it himself. It's called DCD Tracker. It's nowhere anyone could get or would want. So it's basically a very fancy spreadsheet with some timing devices and some email functionality. I mean, it was cutting edge 15 years ago.
So if I just the same lines. So this is more of an internal QA, right? Which the documentation team does, or is it this cycle is followed for the technical reviews also?
This is what you have in the spreadsheet is
Right,
internal.
yes.
So it's assigned, the builder works on it, it goes to the intern, and they make their edits. Very clearly, we have a concise process that has to happen. They have a screenshot and a description of exactly what needs to be changed. We keep that email string for the whole process so it's easy to locate, right? Again, very old school, but that's how we're doing it now. And then once it passes the intern review, it comes through to management, goes through that same cycle until it's ready, and then it's published.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being nice, audience. And if you have any queries, we'll take off stage because the next session has to start.
Your QA team would definitely be preparing the test cases, either some scenarios which are out of the box or not according to the functionality, but a rare case scenario that can be experienced by a customer. So do you guys, go in tandem with the QA guys and work on those cases as well? Or is it only with the documentation out of the scenario cases that you have experienced as you put yourself in the shoes of a customer?
We're usually doing our part after the bulk of their QA is when we'll get involved with it. But how do I want to put that? So the test cases come from, we have a group called business analysts who are very familiar with what the customer is going to do in real life, right? So that is definitely one of those communications that we keep wide open so that they feel free to go to them and get an understanding before they even start building of what a customer is going to use this for. What are they really going to do with it? So that they're considering that while they're building the content.
Okay, so considering one of your past customer experiences, something that you would like to add to your out-of-the-box user cases for an intern who has just joined your organization?
We actually have a pretty vast collection of training content already before we went to this new format where everything is from a single access point and in the product. So they use that to get familiar with what our customers do. And it's using a similar product, right? It's not the same, but I always tell my team that most software are the same, right? If you're a retail software, it's all doing the same thing. You want to sell stuff and make money. So, so they go through that training, self-training themselves so that they can get familiar with it. And then just as they go through the process and it goes around, they catch on.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause to Kim and Siva. It was a very interesting session on the ABCs of QA. I would like to hand over the mementos to Kim and Siva. So we just come to the thing. Thank you, everyone. So there's a next session starting now. So people who want to